Hi there. Today I'm going to share with you a few advanced and intermediate Amazon PPC tips. So I'm going to start off with a couple of campaign structures that I think are pretty good in terms of how easy they make finding a product and how easy they make optimizing data, moving search terms around, adding new products or variations, and to understand what is really converting and what is not. So again, the campaign structure when you start out is important. And hopefully at this point, you guys already have a structure that you're using that is working for you. But I'm going to show you what I use as an Amazon seller and as a full-time PPC consultant. Um, I'm just going to share with you a few screens showing you what has worked for me in the past. Okay, and I'm going to go over a number of auto campaigns you should have, or you can have a number of manual campaigns. How would you add variations to an existing campaign, and what you do when you move phrase to exact matches, and what do you do when you have a singular of a search term converting and a plural not converting. What would you do in that case? And I'm also going to talk about PPC conversion rate, how you could find that out. And I'm going to talk about negative phrase match a search term. So let's start with the PPC campaign structure. So I'm going to go over here on this slide. So here, let's say you're selling kid headphones. So basically, in this example here, I have a couple of variations. I have a red one and a blue one. So one way I like to structure my campaigns is you would structure it so that the name basically represents the variation. So red kid headphones in this case. This would be my campaign name. So under that, I would have 3 different ad groups. In each ad group, I would call it broad for broad match type. I would have one for phrase and I would have one for exact. So as you can see in the example down there, the first one here, so it would be broad red and then kid headphones. So that makes it easy to understand the structure, and then makes it a lot easier when you have to move stuff around, and also when you're optimizing, so you can have a visual representation of the data. So you could easily, when you use if you're using Excel to filter all that stuff, so you could easily see what ad groups to look at you're looking at and what campaigns you're looking at. So that's one way I like doing it. But that works well if you don't have a lot of variations. So if you have between 2 to 5 variations, I think this is a good campaign structure. But when you have like a lot of different variations, I would recommend a structure like this, where you have basically one campaign for each variation. So in other words, one campaign for the broad, for the red headphones, and you have a phrase for the red headphones, and you have another exact one for the red kid headphones. And you will repeat the same for the blue headphones. So you will have a broad, a phrase, and exact. The reason I like this when you have a lot of variations or ASINs is, when you have, let's say, 20 variations, if you have the names if you have them structured like this, you could easily see what you're doing when you're actually looking at the data. So I probably will do another video on how I basically look at data with that type of structure. But for now, understand that if you have like a lot of variations, this would be the right structure to start off with. But if you already have a structure like this, I mean, that's great in my opinion. So those two are, in my opinion, the best 2 structures of ad campaigns. So now let's go over the number of campaigns that you should have or you can have. In the past, I guess a lot of people had only one automatic campaign. I think nowadays that a lot of people are trying different combinations of automatic campaigns. The way I like to do it is having 2 to 3 automatic campaigns. So I would have basically one campaign per variation. So each of those campaigns would have, I would have a mid bid campaign, and I would have a high bid campaign. So what that means is, let's say you're bidding 50 on the low, the high would be like 55 cents. Well, so 50 cents for the low and 55 cents for the high. But make sure that those bids are lower than your manual campaigns. Otherwise, you're going to be competing for impressions. You don't want to do that. So between so to recap, between 2 to 3 auto campaigns, I think is a good way to attract new, I guess, to know, to let Amazon tell you what customers are searching for. So, and again, 2 to 3. So basically you would have a low bid, a high bid, and a mid bid. So if you're starting at 45 cents, one will be 45, the other one will be 50, and the following will be 60 cents. And again, they have to be lower than your manual campaigns. Now, when it comes to manual campaigns, actually the examples I showed you is pretty much what they are. So you would have, in the case you don't have that many ASINs, I would recommend you use 2 manual campaigns one per ASIN. So you would have one for the red and one for the blue, right? If you have like 3 to 4, then you could just add, if you have like purple or green, whatever color you have, you just add them using this structure here, where you have the name of the variation, and under that you would have AdGroups for each match type, meaning a broad, a phrase, and an exact. And the number, again, depends on how many ASINs you have. So if you have a lot of variations, like I said before, then you would have a structure like this, where each variation would be its own campaign. And under that campaign, you only have one ad group, which is you could repeat the same name basically, but label it a way where you could easily recognize it when you're analyzing your data. So that covers automatic and manual campaigns. And then adding variations, if you have the right structure, like over here, it would be easy to add a variation here. So you would just add another campaign, and then you have 3 ad groups for each match type. So you would have, basically for blue, you would have, a green that's not there. You would just have a campaign called Blue Kid Headphones, and you would add 3 ad groups under that with the exact name of the variation itself, plus the match type. So in other words, broad, green, kid headphones, and then phrase, and then an exact one. Now, to move a phrase to an exact, a lot of people are basically negative exacting a phrase and then moving that search term into an exact campaign or an ad group. So one thing I would recommend here is to make sure that before you move a search term from phrase to exact, that you don't negative exact it immediately, but you test it as a separate ad group before, right? So if you have an ad group, let's say in this example here, so let's say that the phrase red kid headphones is converting really well, right? You have a keyword there and a specific search term there that's converting really well. I wouldn't negative exact it before I test the same exact search term in an exact ad group. So I would do that first to see how the algorithm, I guess, affects it. Because sometimes, with an exact type match, you usually have higher CPC, cost per click, and possibly higher ACoS. So you want to make sure that before you pick one over the other, you know which one is converting better. So I would test the same search term under different ad groups. So basically under different ad groups and different match types. So again, you would have one search term under the phrase ad group, and you have the exact one under the exact ad group. So hopefully that makes sense. And then you could just see which one is performing best and then pause one if, or just leave both of them running if the ACOS is okay, right? So now the next one is singular and plural search term. This one is a little bit tricky because I've had problems with that in the past where the singular of a search term would perform really well and then the plural would not. I mean, would basically lose money. It happens. I mean, it depends on what you're selling, but in the case of, let's say, headphones, if you're selling a red headphones, right? So let's assume that the red headphones is performing well. The singular of red is performing well. Let's say the reds headphones, for some reason people are searching reds, for example. I'm just making things up, right? So let's assume people are also searching for reds headphone, and this one is not converting well. So what do you do in this case? You might think of just negative exacting the plural, but the algorithm sometimes doesn't like that. It would just stop showing up for the singular and the plural. So, but since the singular is converting well for you, you don't want to do that. So what I would do in this case is just leave it alone. I mean, just if it's not, costing you a ton of money, just leave it there. Or you could experiment with adding it in a separate, not pausing anything, but just creating a keyword with the plural and test it in a different ad group. So in other words, if it's under a phrase ad group it's performing well, let's say the singular is performing well under a phrase, I would take the exact search term, I would create it, I would move it into an exact ad group and then just let it run and see if I get conversions there. And if not, then there's not much you can really do. If all the conversions go under one search term, then just leave it alone. There's not much you can do. So now the next topic would be PPC conversion rate. I hope that most of you are looking at that as one of the metrics you should consider when in terms of I guess performance of your PPC ads. And to look at it, you gotta go. I mean, Seller Central doesn't give you that information right off the bat, so you're gonna have to basically up there. If you look here, it's basically the ratio of orders to clicks. So if this wasn't showing up, then you would just click here, add metric, and you would select click or order, whichever one is missing, and you just divide the number of orders to number of clicks, and that will give you a percentage of some sort. A good rule of thumb is that percentage should match whatever conversion rate that Amazon gives you under the reports. So I'll show you right here. You go under reports, business reports. So under here, if you select search by ASIN, you select detailed sales and traffic by a child item. If you do that, make sure you select the correct dates. Let's say you're looking for last month, for example. You could select the beginning of, let's say, August to the end of August. You could do that, and it will give you a percentage here. So the percentage you want to look at here is called unit session percentage. So you want to make sure you compare, the right product to percentage. I mean, this is a pretty well converting product for one of my customers. 20% is very good, pretty decent conversion rate. So I doubt that your PPC conversion rate would match that, but if it does, great. If it doesn't, then optimizing it might improve on that. But ideally, you want your PPC conversion rate to match this unit session percentage rate. Okay, so that would cover that. And then the next thing would be negative phrase matching a search term. When do you do that? And when would you feel comfortable doing that, right? So I guess it's dependent on whoever is doing this. But to me, if a search term is obviously not related to my product, then I would let it actually run a little bit, um, but not by much. I mean, if I get 2 to 3 clicks and then no conversion, then I would feel safe, you know, I would feel safe removing it. But then again, it depends on how relevant it is to your product. If it's completely irrelevant, then sure. I mean, I would negative phrase it fairly quick, you know. But if it's something you think might be related to your product, give it a few let it run a bit so that it gets enough impressions and enough clicks, and then you could make like a more solid decision on negative phrasing it, because you might get a sale. That one sale might make your ACOS better, and that could change things, right? So you want to make sure you give it enough time. That's the end point. Make sure that depending on how relevant you think the search term is, the more time I would give it. So if it's somewhat relevant, I would give it a little bit more time. If it's like obviously not relevant, then I would negative exact it fairly quickly. Okay, so that would be it for today. And then again, let's recap. So campaign structure, very important. You got to make sure that you have a naming convention where you could easily recognize the campaign, the ad groups, and then when you're optimizing, it would be easy when you glance at the Excel spreadsheet if you're using Excel, which I use a combination of Excel and some software. Where, I mean, you could use Excel if you want. I mean, it's free, and you could use Google Sheets or whatever. Whatever you're using, it's important to have the right structure, because the naming convention becomes important as well. So make sure you name it properly so you could easily optimize, easily see what keywords are converting, and easily move search terms around. Okay? And then the number of auto and manual campaigns, again, depends on the structure that you select, which are my two favorite ones I showed you at the beginning. So you would have one campaign. Let's say you have a few, not too many variations. You would have one campaign, and then under that campaign, you would have 3 ad groups. And then that would be a campaign per ASIN. And then another one would be basically a brand new ASIN, a brand new campaign for each variation. So it's only one ad group in this case. So you would have one ad group for one variation and one for one match type. So you would have a lot more campaigns in that case, but it gives you a more granular look at the data. I mean, if you have a lot of ASINs, that's the campaign structure I would recommend. Okay, and then again, adding variations, you could do it as a new campaign, or you could do it as a new ad group, as I showed you in the 2 structures I have. And then before you basically negative phrase a search term, make sure that it's performing. You test it before, and you test it as an exact and as a phrase at the same time. So you don't want to, in other words, you don't want to negative exact it before you know that the exact one is going to perform as well. If it's not, then I would keep the phrase and then pause the exact, right? And then singular and plural. I mean, again, that's a little tricky. So be careful when you negative exacting singular and plural. I actually don't do it at all. I mean, unless you're certain that the plural is basically, if you negative exact the plural, make sure that it's not taking out the singular. If you're sure of that, then yeah, you could do it. But otherwise, don't do it, because in my experience, it cuts off both singular and plural. So you would be losing on a lot. So just don't do it, And then I showed you how to figure out what your conversion rate is, PPC conversion rate, that is. So basically, that's the number of orders, PPC orders that you get, and then you divide that by the number of clicks. And that number should come close, or ideally be close to the conversion rate of your listing, which I showed you under reports where that is. And then the last thing here is make sure that before you negative phrase match a search term, that you're sure that it is not relevant. I mean, again, that's completely dependent on the product you're selling. If it is, if it's obviously not relevant, then yeah, by all means, remove it. But if you're not sure and if it's maybe related to your product, I would give it some chance. I would give it some time. Let some clicks happen and you determine then if you want to negative phrase it or not. Okay? So that would be it for this time, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please subscribe and comment below with any specific questions that you might have, and I'll be glad to get back to you. So thank you again, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.